Okay, so yeah. Welcome everyone, both to the audience here and the audience online. So I'm Diletta Marcucci and I am a PhD candidate at Pompeu Fabra here in Barcelona. I'm also coordinator of GRITIM and I'm a doctoral researcher in the project Broader along with Rafik. So thank you, Rafik, for coming today. Rafik is a postdoctoral researcher at GRITIM at Pompeu Fabra University, and he works on the research project Broader, Bridging the Migration and Urban Study Nexus. And he mainly investigates urban reconfigurations in both large, medium, small cities and rural areas based on the narratives, practices, and policies of reception of asylum and refugee demandants. Rafik has a PhD in social geography and urban planning from the University of Clermont-Auvergne in France, and his doctoral thesis is titled Multiple Territories, Plural Reception, Social Geographies of the Receptions of Asylum Seekers in metropolitan areas. His thesis received in April 2022 the grand prize of the city of Clermont-Ferrand for the best thesis of the year at the UCA, University of Clermont-Auvergne. And some of his recent publications are the asylum seekers in metropolitan areas in France, and also the effects of territory on reception and of reception on territory. So the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Diletta. Thanks everyone for coming. And I'm super happy to be here today and also to see all of you, the students, and also thanks to Diletta and to the whole team of GRITIM for inviting me. So as Diletta said, my main topic is related to the arrival of asylum seekers or refugees to areas who located outside the metropolises. So, but I know that this session is mainly focusing on the Mediterranean area. So my main purpose is to invite you to maybe broad our reflection about the Mediterranean dynamics from the Mediterranean cities that are super well known, such as Barcelona, City of Refuge, but also other small towns, such as Riace in Italy, for instance, to other small towns and rural areas who are also taking part in a kind of global dynamics directly related to the Mediterranean area. And for that, I would like to start with a map, a sensitive map. I will go back in a while to talk more about this method, because I will try also maybe to explain better how I worked on this topic. This map was drawn by a person who is Sudanese. He left Sudan to France, and he was in 2018 accommodated in a small village called Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, which is in the center of France. And he drew a map on his lived space and how he see his space of reception in small towns related to his emotions. So this map starts on the top, on the left. There is no north, there is no south. The emotions are the only direction of drawing this map. So he left Sudan and he put these red circles to better explain the reasons why he left the country. Of course, the common reasons, we can find personal reasons that are super common also for the departure. And then you can see that this map started on the top and finished on bottom on the left. So in this route, in this journey, connecting Sudan, his hometown, to the small village, we can see that the Mediterranean here, drawn in gray, The map is in Arabic, so he wrote on this area where the black circle is there, the Mediterranean Sea, where he crossed the border, and he crossed the Mediterranean during 5 days. And so for him, his life in the small village cannot be dissociated to the previous experiences. For him, the reception or the dynamics that are going between himself and the other actors that he met during his journey that take a lot of months cannot be dissociated one to another. All of them are connected and build a common space. Within this common space, the Mediterranean area is central. So let's start to explain a bit more about this topic, why these asylum seekers are arriving to remote areas or to rural spaces, and how is the dynamic in these spaces. Here you have the front page of a newspaper, French newspaper called Libération, which is written Village Terre d'Accueil, and it means village, a land of reception or of host. And this newspaper is trying to explain two things: that the villages are at the heart or are central in the global geography of reception for asylum seekers and for refugees, and on the other hand, trying to say or to make a kind of assumption that villages are super nice to welcome people. So taking the assumption that villages and rural areas are good for the reception. So there is a kind of romanticization in the newspaper, on the public debate about the arrival in rural areas. So, of course, you know, I guess a lot of you know the case of Riachi, which is not only since 2015, but since a lot of years, when the mayor took the decision to accommodate people and to make this Ciutat Futura, and to make a kind of future by associating also migrants to the village. So there is a kind of romanticization, but let's see how is concretely the dynamic in these areas. So why the rural spaces emerged as a central space in the geography of reception for asylum seekers in Mediterranean countries, especially in the northern Mediterranean countries. I am talking here about the case of France. So first of all, it's due to the national dispersal policy that was initiated in France, actually, but also in other European countries such as Germany, other European countries, more in the northern European countries, since the middle of the 1970s. So when the states decided to delegate the competence of the reception to NGOs, they started to build a kind of dispersal policies among several territories, from the capital, for instance, Paris, to other territories. And within this dispersal policy, that is not new at all, but it's there since 50 years almost, there is also a kind of reinforcement of a new apparition, like in Spain, since 2015. So this reinforcement is also within the this aim to create new places within or to accommodate asylum seekers. Although still only 50%, for instance, of asylum seekers have an access to accommodation, for instance, in France. So there is still few people who are accessing to this accommodation. So small towns and rural areas have this characteristic of, for instance, having an access to housing vacancy, or to have an access to places that are not possible in such large-sized cities. So you can see the three maps of the municipalities or areas who are accommodating or who are having center of accommodations in France since the 1999 to 2017. And you can see that after 2015, the circles with the green color appeared and are reinforced. Just to explain, within the article that was written by William Berthomier and other colleagues in France, to better explain that small towns and rural areas are central in this policy. So this dynamic is not new at all. I mean, the arrival in the literature, the arrival of asylum seekers or refugees to remote areas or to rural areas are also at the heart of the literature in the US, but also in the European countries. So, but also we can see that after 2015, more and more research has been carried out about the arrival of refugees outside metropolitan areas, trying to better explain what are the dynamics there, what are the conflicts that can emerge between the different actors. So I will talk about a region which is called Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes in France. You can see it in the blue on the blue in the map. So first of all, to better identify my areas, you can see on this map that there are three main colors with the red and the blue, or two main colors, red and blue. And so within these colors, you have the small towns and the big cities. So first of all, I try to better identify three territories that are located in non-metropolitan areas. So you can see here a kind of example of concrete accommodations. So you have accommodations who are among several municipalities, but you have also accommodations such as the photo on the bottom, which is regrouped in a common center. So then here I'm trying to better explain that the territories are these centers of reception, but at the end, the people who are seeking asylum and cross the Mediterranean area are not coming in the same rural areas and small towns. So these areas are super diverse. There is a plurality in terms of territorial dynamics. So on this map, the color which is blue, a clear blue color, it means that the territory is dynamic, having a better access to public services, to public transport, also to the center. And the dark blue, it means also that there are a kind of fragility to access to public services, etc. So I try to look on different dynamics to better explain or to verify the kind of hypothesis that these heterogeneous territorial dynamics are directly acting on the reception of the asylum seekers. And here you have three different types of municipalities. So you have on the dark, for instance, municipalities which are dynamic, affluent, and on the red, municipalities with a high proportion of immigrant population and social housing. On the green, municipalities in decline. This map was carried out with two other colleagues actually after my PhD within a research project that I am collaborating with. So to better explain the dynamics of the reception in these areas, I try to use a classical methods, but also a kind of experimental methods with participatory and sensitive cartography. What it means, because I know that all of you are, of course, more used to maybe to use semi-structured interviews, but maybe participatory and sensitive cartography is less used. So first of all, why sensitive maps? Because when asylum seekers arrive to European countries, they cross the Mediterranean or not, they are facing the administrations of asylum. These administrations are based on a kind of face-to-face discursive methods, trying to better understand when, why, how they left their countries, from which countries they crossed, etc. So first of all is an ethical issue. So trying to avoid this kind of violence reproduction within the face-to-face discursive methods. Then there is a political issue, which is trying to avoid to atomize the words that coming, or the aspirations that are coming from the asylum seekers themselves, without talking on their names, but trying to together co-construct a kind of words and of a kind of narratives also. And a third issue is epistemological issue, is trying to rethink the map from the top down to the bottom up approach. So to reappropriate the map as a tool of power to explain themselves, their aspirations, and the challenges that they face. So basically, it's a method that regroups in kind of workshops, persons around tables, to try to, from individual experiences, try to construct a collective discourse on their journey, because each of them, coming from Sudan or coming from Syria, have an individual experience, but all of them are located into these remote areas or rural areas or small towns. So what is the collective discourse? So then within these words that we put on the wall, and we regroup together, we decide on the color together, and we try to have a key maps that they will be used on their individual maps. So to respond to this a kind of issue, what it means to receive or to arrive in rural areas and small towns. So here you have this kind of circle of Stevenson, we call it. And so I try to better understand within the several territories what are the needs from these persons and what are the needs that are also identified by volunteers or by local stakeholders that they are working with them. So I will give just one example because the circle can take a lot of time to talk on it. But if you look on isolated territory, which is not the case every time, you will see that there are specific dynamics are emerging, for instance, in 2 from the 3 territories, by, for instance, proposing a carpooling in solidarity or solidarity bicycles inside the territories. So the responses basically that are emerging in small towns and rural areas are trying to respond to injustices, but at the local level. So the issue of arriving or what happened before is not every time taken into account by persons who are also working together with them or are living with them, such as, for instance, the psychological trauma, which is a big issue there. So in these territories, there are persons who are living in large-sized cities, but not only in small-sized towns. What I try to tell is that these local actors, including the inhabitants, for instance, are super diverse. So they have social capitals, symbolic capitals, or spatial capitals that they are using to commit with the asylum seekers, or also to decide which kind of activity that they are going to work together. So here it's super important because within the literature we can sometimes understand or see that spaces, when they are densified and they have also a high demographic density, they are more open, or they are supposed to be more open than spaces. They are low demographic, they have a low demographic density, which is not true at all, because here we don't take into account this diversity of these actors, because also they are coming from other territories, they experienced themselves a migration dynamics, etc. And so it builds in small spaces a kind of complementarity. This complementarity is encouraged by this kind of solidarity of knowing each other in small towns. You have to imagine that in a village, people are knowing each other, which is kind of solidarity, but also raising a kind of challenges. We can talk on it after that. So, first of all, before arriving to the experiences of the asylum seekers themselves, which is a kind of central dynamic here in my presentation, I want just to tell you that within this global dynamic, which is not only concerning the Mediterranean area, the small towns and the rural areas are impacted. How? This arrival, for instance, is reshaping also the spaces outside the metropolises. Here I put the example of, I called a territory of solidarity, adapting existing places to a new arrival persons. So this NGO was carrying kind of language courses to foreigners before the arrival of refugees, before 2015. So when the asylum seekers arrived, they just adapted the workshops or the courses to these newcomers to try to involve them. So they have this kind of social associations, or the social solidarity is adapted to the newcomers. So here, the social solidarity is adapted, and so the territory is a kind of adapted or reshaped. But in other case, is more radical. I mean, also is adapted within, for instance, raising a kind of awareness within the inhabitants. I put here this comic that was drawn by an artist in a department called La Savoie within this region that I showed you before. And it's talking about two Syrian refugees that they crossed the Mediterranean area, and they are coming from two different cities in Syria, and they met on the bottom, on the right, in the central place of the village or the small town called Saint-Pierre d'Albini. What this comic is trying to better explain, that here we have newcomers, new persons, that they are living together with us. And our village is connected to other spaces and to other experiences. Within these spaces, we find also the Mediterranean region. In other cases, the territory is completely reshaped in a territory of rebellion. So we have also persons, there are also persons that are rejecting completely the logic of the production of the space. So for instance, here I am talking about a place called L'Élégante, which was created in a small town called Ambert. This L'Élégante is basically a building that is hosting families who were rejected, their asylum procedure was rejected from the central state. So they were ejected also from the accommodation. So they lost this accommodation. So it's trying to, first of all, to provide an accommodation for people who are now facing a great injustice. Then this space is not only a space for accommodation, it's a space of debate. In this small town, these persons try to create completely new dynamic by talking or involving other topics, such as, for instance, environmental topics, talking on gender issues, on feminism, on injustices, on racism, etc. So it's kind of proposing a new logic and also a new kind of living the space, outside the metropolises. So this is also another type of proposing a kind of reshape, how to reshape also the spaces outside metropolises, mainly based for the territory of rebellion on the cultural events. So for instance, I'm putting here this invitation that was drawn by local artists to invite persons and to make at the same time awareness. So a lot also of events, cultural events, was also proposed to the persons who are living there. That was not the case before the arrival of asylum seekers before 2015. So this is the first part of how this arrival is reshaping the spaces outside metropolises. These spaces are not only spaces of, providing accommodation, solidarity, but also within the spaces we face a lot of conflicts and challenges. So I am putting a kind of example in a small village called de Chambon-sur-Lignon. This village is super important because it's recognized as a space or village of the just. So here people saved Jewish children, especially during the Second World War. So during the Second World War, and this history made the village super symbolic at the national level, but also at the international level. And so there is also a small museum who is involving exhibitions on this solidarity. But also this village is accommodating asylum seekers since 2001. When the asylum seekers arrived in 2016, the municipality, the mayor, refused to extend the center of accommodation. So this made a kind of conflict between the local NGOs, for instance, La CIMAD, which is a super important NGO in France, and volunteers, and also the municipality. The municipality didn't accept to extend it because they said that this museum is only specific to this period of the Second World War. So here is a kind of trying to avoid the new time or the new period of accommodation, of reception. So this banner at the entrance of the village called Exilés l'accueil d'abord, exiled people, the reception first, is not a simple banner. Why? Because when we analyze it, you see on the building one, which is the temple of Protestant, it's a Protestant temple, is facing the museum. And this Protestant temple is trying to implement this kind of history of accommodation, but open to everyone, not only to a specific period. And to add to this specific history of the Second World War, a new history, which is also the reception of asylum seekers. So here also, within these small towns and rural areas, we are other global conflicts that are also a kind of facing a kind of conflict. So it's specifically borderization and marginalization within a kind of temporal issue. Finally, what about the asylum seekers themselves? So, of course, I would like to try, first of all, to explain you, or to give you, or to share with you maybe, to share with you is I think, better as word, a map that was drawn by a person who is from Syria. And he is trying to better explain his journey within a kind of circle. So, as the same first map, the sensitive map, you can see that there are different triangles, okay? You can see that from the beginning in Syria, in 28th of May 2014, he started his travel. He lived in Turkey, in Istanbul, but also in Ankara. He tried to project his life there, but he couldn't. He couldn't during 2 years. So he left the country and he crossed the border, he crossed the Mediterranean, he was living in camps or detained, the word is more just, detained in a camp in Greece. And so for him, before arriving to France, but it doesn't mean France, but before arriving to the possibility to be recognized by the central state, he couldn't project his life. So here, the time is trying to avoid him to have any legitimacy or any space to project himself. Secondly, another map was drawn by a woman coming from Ivory Coast. This map started on the left side and finished on the right side. You can see also that, of course, as all of these maps, the Mediterranean area is central and super important. But what is interesting here is you see the triangle orange, which represent stress and the pain. Stress and pain in Libya, in Niger, during crossing the border, in the Mediterranean, but also in Paris, in France. So the border is also moving within the body of this person. Why she puts the triangle there? Because she explained that without any accommodation before arriving to the village, she was facing a sexual harassment, a sexual aggressions. So here you can see that the borders are also extended within the experience of the persons. And finally, we have, we can also ask a question about the time of asylum, because as I said before, the reception, as I took the reception or the definition of reception as a process, first of all, process of negotiation, negotiating places and negotiating a kind of legitimacy between persons or actors that they don't have the same legitimacy in the space. So what is the time of accommodation doing to the lived space of the persons living outside metropolises? The first map was drawn by a person who is coming from Cameroon. He is 18 years old. And the question was super simple. I said, what about drawing your experience in the small town? What it represents for you, the small town that you are living and you are accommodated in. So for him, the small town is empty streets and is the NGOs who are trying to help them or trying to find within these NGOs a kind of solutions to some kind of emergencies. It's his private space or also a small space, which is a stadium, who is doing a kind of sociability with other persons. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't know this, the small towns, because this small town called Montmillion in the Savoie department is a small town with a lot of public spaces, public places, cafe, and persons in his age are going on that places. So he walk also on these places. He also practices these places. But in his lived map, in his lived space, it doesn't exist. For him, the time of waiting, the asylum procedure or response from the administration is raising or erasing the space that he is practicing. So here, the time of asylum is erasing completely the space that he is living. In other cases, that there are some other places in another completely village, a person living with his family, his wife, and his 2 children, and he's practicing the public space, such as the cafe, the church, the park. But as you can see on the center of the map, he's putting still the triangle orange, the stress. So I asked him why, even if you practice this space, you are still practicing this stress. And of course, for him, the answer is super obvious, because the time of waiting the asylum, and by the way, he was rejected, I mean, the asylum application was rejected, is a kind of alienation for him. And so he is avoiding any possibility to project his life in these spaces. So at the end, I think before ending, I would like to say that within the global dynamic of the Mediterranean area, the small towns and the rural areas are emerging also as spaces connected to the Mediterranean dynamic, but first of all, within the experience of the asylum seekers themselves. So within the lived space of the asylum seekers, we can see that border dynamics, marginalization are also traveling, if I can say it, to remote spaces and are not only connected to the physical Mediterranean area. So to better understand how much the Mediterranean area is impacting the whole region, and also regions that are not physically directly connected to the Mediterranean Sea, we can see that here these villages, within the experiences but also within the national policies of exclusion, such as the dispersal policies, because they are not giving any choice to the persons to choose their place of accommodation, we are seeing this kind of dynamics of borders and marginalization. So thanks for your answers, and we can talk maybe much more.
Okay, so thank you so much, Rafik, for your presentation that I think opens up a necessary topic, not just because of the role of the small size and medium cities, but also because of the fact that on the literature there are less research than other mainstream or bigger cities. So aside from that, I think that it was very enlightening how you brought up to discussion the methodologies which are less used compared to others that you used for your research, and also the role that the narratives of refugees and asylum seekers can have in those dynamics. And I think it was also interesting hearing some specific cases that you mentioned, which are about small and medium cities located, in fact, in the Mediterranean area, like the case of Riace that you mentioned, and how it can intersect with the topic of the public debate. So we can start now from the question that you might have, and the floor is of the audience.
Not super inspiring.
So no questions. I don't know, maybe you can say something more about, because in one map that you showed before, there was a high relevance to the housing and the dimension of the housing. I don't know if you can elaborate more on how the housing, I don't know, even in connection to the public debate, for example.
Yes, I think that the issue, thanks for the question. I think that, the issue of housing is quite central, but is central because it's related to why the spaces outside metropolitan areas emerged as central. Because first of all, as I said before, the delegation of a national competence, which is the Barcelona, and of course we try to build a kind of housing stock for accommodating asylum seekers. It's a kind of challenge. I can say, and I can talk about that within a topic that I am working on related to the research project broader. So for instance, persons like the municipality, one is trying to build a kind of autonomous policy to become a city of refuge. There are a lot of challenges, and of course the first and main challenge is the challenge of housing, because there is a very fragile housing or rental housing stock in Barcelona. So of course here the geography of accommodation is built outside, I would say, spaces with a demographic tension. So here the rural areas are also central, but at the same time within a kind of utilitarian approach, because Also, for instance, if we look on the case of Riachi, but also on the spaces that I showed you right now, for instance, municipalities, when they are involved within these dynamics, even it's not their competence, as I said before, they are involved within several dynamics. They are involved because they want to build a kind of political, due to a political aim, to become, of course, open and welcoming, but at the same time, because sometimes there is a kind of fragility to access to public services. So we can give an example. To maintain a public school in France, there is a need to maintain a kind of demographic standard. So they need to accommodate, mayors here to accommodate persons, families especially. So they do also kind of typology, within this dispersal policy, but at the local level, to try to accommodate families with children, to try to save the public schools or to maintain the public services, which is a kind of, I would say, paradox, because at the same time, the state is trying to reduce the access to public services because also there are rules. And this kind of dynamics that they are building within the remoted areas, but at the same time, they are using a kind of another fragility, because the arrival of asylum seekers in itself, it's a fragility, because there are people that are facing a lot of difficulties, challenges, injustices, etc., to respond also to territorial dynamics. So, and sometimes it raises, conflicts, but it raises also ethical issues and injustices. And at the end, also the question of should we maintain the reception at the local level? So one of the three spaces that I explored, for instance, within this research, the whole team of social workers just left the job because they were not agreeing within this local policy of a kind of utilitarian approach.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
First of all, thank you so much, Rafik and Diletta, and thank you, Rafik, for the lecture, because it has been very interesting. Actually, my question is not a real question, it's more a curiosity. Since I've never heard about that methodology that you decided to use, so the map, but also like the use of the semi-structured interviews that I saw that were so many. If you can explain more about that, about the decision that why you decided to use that type of methodology, because it's really interesting for me, and in my opinion, the fact that you decided to use the map, that type of map, to connect the travel and all the emotions of the people who draw the map with the, not the common and the general map we are used to think about. So for me, it's really interesting too.
Perfect. Okay. So thanks a lot for this question. Yeah, of course, because findings are related to how also we try to explore spaces and to try to build the research. But first of all, why I choose this method? As I said, like the three the three aims, the three issues, ethical, etc. But to share with you a personal experience within my master thesis. Also, maybe it could be interesting for some of you who are maybe also doing a master thesis. When I started to work on this topic during my master degree, I first of all started to to collect data within semi-structured interviews. So face-to-face in the center of accommodation. And after that, I just, talked, of course, with the persons that I interviewed, but also after that, I had like a kind of feeling that I am in a space which is closed face to face, to respect, of course, the anonymity, to respect the privacy, regarding the ethical approach that universities are imposing, of course, sometimes, etc. But I mean, it raises another violence, because for them, that they had already the persons that I interviewed that time, they had already their appointment with the administrations of asylum. They just had this feeling that there is a kind of reproduction of this kind of positionality with a person who has a kind of authority. Because I mean, I am asking them if they want, of course, to participate, but I mean, it's not compulsory for them. But at the end, I am there with this positionality, and so here I felt that there is a kind of reproduction of symbolic violence, let's say. So that's why, and from when I would say that I started to look in other methods, but it's not a method that I created at all. It's a method that is a quite common in geography, especially in social geography, but also I used a method that was developed by a team at the University of Grenoble with artists and persons who are seeking asylum and refugees. And so working with one of the participants or one of the researchers helped me to better explain or better understand how I could also improve it. So this is how I started to try to build like this kind of or to co-produce this kind of workshops with them. But at the same time, of course, there are these sensitive maps, and they are not exempt of also other injustices or problems or challenges, because of course I am also interviewing, as I said before, for instance, a woman. So what it means, because we are not in the face-to-face, but we are in a kind of parallel position and trying to share this super hard experience for them. It's a quite not super easy for them, and of course it's not compulsory. So to try to find the time, to find the way is still a kind of process that is challenging. I'm not sure that there is a best way to do it, but at the end, that's how I try to address this issue. But at the same time, to combine it, of course, with semi-structured interviews, but not with them, but with other stakeholders, because as I interviewed, inhabitants, social workers, mayors, or representatives of states, and other persons also doing observations, etc. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rafik, very much. I was just wondering, going back to policy topics, which are a bit more boring, but I know that you're doing some research in Spain also right now, so I was wondering if you can let us know a bit more your thoughts on the differences between France and Spain, like knowing that France is a way more centralized country, if you felt some differences in terms of dynamics between these small and medium towns and cities in Spain and in France, in terms of capacity, in terms of dispersion policies, in terms of the involvement of NGOs. If you can tell us more, if you've grasped already some of these differences that I'm curious about. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Thanks a lot, Ainara. It's really important question, and I think that I started my field in Spain just 1 year ago, because it's not that much, but at the end I see already of course some similarities but also some differences regarding maybe 2 or 3 things. First of all, as you said, this issue of decentralization. So at the same time is an issue that I think within the political context, within some competencies, so regions in France or in Spain, our municipalities even, they don't have the same weight. So They don't have the same place in the political geography of the country. And also when looking on a super important issue for the public debate, which is the migration issue. But at the same time, there are also differences in terms of when we first of all, when we explore spaces that are outside metropolitan areas. When I arrived, I remember to these small villages or small towns, etc. I mean, I was visible by doing the research. So of course, people know themselves. And I would say that the first difference, super important, is how the solidarity is built. It doesn't mean that in the large-sized spaces, on the small towns, there is better or strongest solidarity, but it means that the visibility and also the legitimacy within the public space is absolutely not the same. It could be interesting, but at the same time, it could be also a bit annoying. I remember when I started to work on this topic, a mayor of a small village, who is now like Riyadh, she's super well known within the HCR, called Pessavilleneuve. It's a small village. And I remember that he told me that here the migrants, I know them one by one. We hug each other. We are neighbors. But the mayors in the big cities, they don't know them. So this solidarity or this visibility is important sometimes to try to respond to specific situations that, for instance, when someone or when one family has its application that is rejected, the political actors are super close to better listen or to better understand to specific situations, which is quite, harder in other large-sized cities. I cannot see even the head of the Department of Migration in Barcelona responding to specific situations within the persons that are coming. And the other also issue is also related to, I think, how much the policy of, the dispersal policy from large-sized cities to small towns is part of the state. So in France, it's there since the 70s. But in Spain, it's quite new, at least regarding the issue of the accommodation of asylum seekers. So here we have a kind of, how can I say it? We have a kind of gestures, or we have also dynamics that are already there. So, and in Spain it's sometimes still in process, for instance, and a kind of, we say, bricolage. So as well in France, but also we can see that this temporality is also super important. As I can give maybe one example, a concrete example in Barcelona, quite interesting. It's a project called Universitat 500. And this project is trying to accommodate immigrants, refugees, or asylum seekers from the 4 large-sized cities of the Catalan region, Barcelona, Lleida, Tarragona, Girona, to small municipalities. And so here, the main issue is that the municipalities, the micropolis, so the NGO, the association who is taking care of this program in collaboration with the Generalitat, is trying to respond to a kind of challenge, which is no having an access to accommodation in the 4 large-sized cities. So here also we can see that there is always a connection between the large-sized cities and the small towns, and also here is within a kind of sometimes an issue of utilitarian approach, because it's also trying to respond to a demographic challenge in the remote areas in the countryside of the Catalan region. So here also we can find that there are also these similarities, and at the same time, the borders, the dynamics of marginalization of persons, that we can find it even by or within these person policies, whether it's top down or bottom up.
There are two questions sent through our YouTube channel. Karen, okay, she sent two questions. Thanks for the interesting presentation. Do the small and medium rural towns accommodating the refugees receive funds from the center? And the second one is, did you find a difference between the positive or negative responses from the asylum seekers that were sent to rural areas by age? For example, those 15, 35 years old versus those 35, 55 years old.
I didn't get the first question, but if you could please...
Do the small and medium rural towns accommodating the refugees receive funds from the center?
What means the center?
From the center, I think.
The central state. Okay. The central state. Okay, thanks. Yes. Thanks a lot. Well, I mean, in France as well in Spain, I can respond. That is not... It's not a question related, as I said, to the municipalities. I mean, the medium or sized towns or small sized towns, it's not the municipalities who are receiving the funds. It's, as I said, the NGOs who are managing the reception of asylum seekers. So, but what I can add is there are no differences, at least in France, between the territories about trying to give the fund. So I can give you an example here. So for instance, if there is an accommodation, there is a reception that is located in a super fragile area without any access to public services, to public transport, etc., the budget will be the same that if the reception is within a super dynamic area without any problem to access to public transport or to other senders or services. So here, this kind of spatialism, we say it, is like to just try to disperse the persons without taking into account the heterogeneity or the plurality of the territories. It's also creating inequalities within the asylum seekers themselves. So the national policy that is implemented sometimes is also raising social injustices within asylum seekers. So the budget is not compensated, for instance, which was also the demand from the social workers or the local NGOs. And for the other question, it was not the main, issue of my work. So I didn't look on like how the persons, the differences between the rejected asylum seekers or the refugees. The answer regarding who is getting more, I can say regarding to many studies that it's related to several reasons, but mainly also to geopolitical reasons. If we look, for instance, on the case of Syrians, if it was in 2015, they will receive the refugee status more if it's the case now. But at the same time, if I can connect it just to what I said before, the difference is when the persons get the refugee status, so the possibility to live in France, for instance, to have an access to accommodation, to have an access to employment, they live mainly the small villages and the small municipalities and the rural areas to large-sized cities. This is the main finding, but the persons who are facing a kind of rejection from the central state remain in the small towns and the rural areas. It means that in these spaces there is a solidarity that was raised. by the local actors, and which is quite interesting, by the way.
Okay. Yes, thank you. It was actually really interesting. And I also have kind of curiosity, and I was wondering if the allocation of certain people or group of people to certain areas, so rural or more central, is completely random or depends on some factors or some kind of logics. Because I mean, I live in Sweden, and I know that, I mean, they are using some algorithms and other kind of technologies to decide which kind of people needs to go to these kind of rural areas. So I was wondering if it's the same here, because I know that also in Switzerland, for instance, is the same case, in Denmark. So I don't know if it's something more of the Nordic countries or if it's general.
Thanks.
Thank you.
In France at least, there is it's not random. So first of all, it's related to the type of accommodations that are available. So there is a centralization of regional centralization about the reception of asylum seekers. So the representative of the state at the regional level has a kind of access to every availability. So when persons are seeking asylum, for instance, regarding to their, first of all, vulnerability. So vulnerability also is a construction, no, it's related to many things. So for instance, a woman who is living alone, or persons who are facing like health problems, etc. But apart from that, it should also match the availability. So for instance, if there is a family with 2 children and parents, and they need to have at least 2 bedrooms and 1 living room. So this capacity, if it's available to a specific place, they will go there. So it's related to this composition. But also what is not really written, and when we do the field work, we can see that at the beginning, when the municipalities are having a new center of accommodation, for instance, and where there is a kind of fair, or there is a kind of constraint, for instance, or a kind of critics coming from the local political actors, the state is trying to send, or like to accommodate or to receive there mainly persons who will have an access to the refugee status. So for instance, within the 3 spaces that I showed you, the space that is located in the department of Savoie, which is at the border of Italy and Switzerland, at the beginning in 2016, when the center was opened, they first of all accommodated Syrians within a program called relocation. So persons who crossed from Turkey to Greece, and they were in Greece, and so they directly were accommodated to these centers. Why? Because they are already accepted almost, and they have an access to refugee status. Because for the local actors, municipal actors, it means for them that they will be not a kind of problem at the local level, to ensure that there is no problem. But this is at the beginning. But then the influx will change, and the type of persons, or of nationalities will change. And so here the problem raise sometimes. And we can see that conflicts also can raise regarding to this issue of who is accepted or who can be rejected. So of course, it's related to the composition of the family, to the availability of the housing, to the composition of the housing market, but at the same time, to this political or maybe even local geopolitical issue that we can see within the small towns or rural areas. So yeah, and also that this kind of key that you talked on in Sweden or in Denmark, etc., is we can see it also in other countries, and it's quite inspired by, I mean, a super how can you say it? By other keys that were built, for instance, in Germany since, if I'm not wrong, since the 50s or the 70s, and so we can find it now again. So this kind of burden sharing, because the migrants are seeing in that case as a burden, and the state is sharing them. So that's why I talked before about like this kind of moving the marginality or the borderization from the Mediterranean area to the remote rural areas.
Test, yes. Also from my part, thank you, Rafik. I have a question related to one of your slides. I think it's the one about with the spider web. I don't know how to call it. It's the one about social injustices and how people responded to it, where you gave the example of mobility. Could you elaborate a bit more on that one? Because there were other dimensions that seemed very interesting as well. Thank you.
Yes. Is that you? Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So this circle is trying to put the needs at the same level. So all of the needs are at the same level. So for instance, adaptation, mobility, nutrition, etc. Okay, and so then there is a kind of risks experienced. So these risks are experienced by the immigrants themselves, but also that they are. That they are pointed by the local actors. And facing these risks experienced at the local level, there is a local synergies that there is emerging there. So apart from the mobility that I said before, there is, for instance, if you look on the reflection, the lack of training, it's super specific to each country. So for instance, in France, before having the access to the refugee status, the NGOs doesn't have any access to the budget to provide the training of language to persons who are seeking asylum. So then the NGOs doesn't have any possibility to provide them this training. So to avoid, or to ensure them a kind of insertion during this time that could take 9 months, 1 year, 2 years, sometimes more than that, there are some, of course, volunteers, super common, that they are providing French courses, etc. So it's a kind of injustices coming from a national law or a national procedure, and the local actors are trying to respond to that. But the most important, I think, is that also the local synergies are raising new injustices. So within the dynamic of reception, it could also raise a new injustices. I can give you a small example. So for instance, in the center of accommodation that I explored, and it's a regrouped accommodation. So you have the sender, and inside this place, there is a small building that is dedicated to several activities. Within the several activities, there is the courses of French language provided by volunteers who are retired. Most of them were, professors of French, etc. And so then this space is a kind of with glass. So we can see who is crossing there, this space, which is inside the private building. So when the courses are provided, those who are not participating to the courses are criticized by the volunteers who are giving the courses, saying that they are fake refugees, that they are not doing efforts to stay and to be integrated within the local community. So it means here that a kind of reproduction of a dynamic that coming from the central state, you know, like there is this kind of separation between fake and the good and the good refugees, and so we can find it also within the volunteers and within the local synergies. So this circle is aiming to address two things. First of all, that each injustice is at least addressed, or there is a kind of tentative to address a local injustice and identified at the local level. But at the same time, this kind of local synergies are super different. So for instance, if you look the mobility, carpooling are not proposed everywhere, because when the municipality is served by the train or public transport, there is no need to that. So we can see that the local synergies are plural regarding to each territory. But also, apart from that, the local synergies are also raising some injustices sometimes, because there is still this kind of legitimacy or not seeing the persons as a neighbors, as some of them says. For instance, when they talked about the territory of rebellion, they said that we are not helping immigrants. We are just trying to find or co-find a solution with neighbors that they are facing some problems. That's all. We don't care about the immigration process, etc. So it's a kind of local legitimacy, okay? But taking care about all of the problems that they faced before. So, for instance, when I talked about the l'Elegant, some persons are also could be invited to talk about their own experience and also about what it means to cross the Mediterranean Sea. So these kind of dynamics are also in the small villages super far. So this is how I try to better explain maybe the complex process of reception, which is not black or white, which is super complex regarding to the heterogeneity of the territories, but also regarding to each actor who is doing or trying to respond to the challenges. I don't know if it responds to Simon's. Sure, I can. Oh, okay.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, I think. So we would like to thank everyone for coming here, and most importantly, Rafik, for your very insightful presentation, and also for the question and answer session. So thank you, everyone, and that's it.
Thanks a lot.